This is Big Tasty Sports. After what feels like a very long hiatus, we are back with some NFL content, although I did just look up before we jumped on, and it's 128 days until opening day, so that was a little bit depressing for me. But I'm thankful to have D Nice and Yanni back on the horn to talk some football. Yanni, how's the offseason going so far?
It's been good, and there's one benefit to being 128 days away from the season. That gives a little bit of relief in terms of prep time with what we're doing with NFL betting.
It's very true. D, how's the offseason going for you?
Pretty good. I can't believe it's already May on the calendar, right? I'm going to need plenty of prep time. I'm trying to do a lot of research, everything like that. It's hard to believe that we're past the draft and everything, but I think that we can try to find some lines to pick off here in the futures and the win total markets, everything like that. So it's never too early, right?
Absolutely. That's I dove back in harder this last week, and it's been fun. So thought, why not get on the horn and talk a little? So we're just going to go through division by division and kind of talk about teams that we find interesting. Maybe talk about how we see these divisions. Obviously, there's still more movement that can happen, but we're through the bulk of the trades and through the draft and all that stuff. So we'll go through and talk about it. Why don't we start in the AFC with the AFC East? I always feel like we should do that just to get Yanni started with the Bills, but
just
this
to get
division,
him fired up.
Yeah, to get him fired up. This division, I will say, as I've started doing some different rankings, this grades out to me again as the toughest division in the NFL this year coming up. So, Yanni, what's something that stands out to you in the AFC East based on what these teams have done in the offseason?
I think you're right. On paper, it is the toughest division top to bottom. Now, we thought that about the AFC West last year, and obviously Denver and the Raiders didn't really fulfill their end of the bargain there. But, I think when you look at this here, obviously the Jets got a lot of hype over the offseason there. When you sign Aaron Rodgers, that's going to happen. But, they also had some other nice signings in there. And, of course, this is a team that had a pretty good defense and a pretty good team behind Zach Wilson last year. So you kind of look and connect the dots and say, is Aaron Rodgers that missing piece? I don't know. I think we have to kind of see how they go. But what I do know is they have a really good roster when you kind of look at it top to bottom on both sides of the football there. So what we get out of Rodgers there, are we going to get an MVP Aaron Rodgers, or are we going to get a little bit of what we saw last year? I think we have to wait and see. But really the things that jump out to me in the AFC East are this. The Bills and the Patriots have the toughest schedules, at least on paper, in terms of being favored or not favored against the spread going into the season. So when I look at those there, I think you have to account for that a little bit. In the Bills' sense, I think their win total, you look at it at first glance, and you're like, oh, they'll go over. They've won 13 games the last couple of years. And I do think that they improved year over year. However, when you look at that schedule, I think that number is pretty accurate. So I actually go back to the Patriots and say, okay, they have a relatively low win total, 7.5, but I've got them at 6-11 when I kind of go through that schedule. I think at the end of the day, they have a murderer's row schedule, and you start figuring out where are these wins going to come from. They have a couple of quote unquote, easier games on the schedule, but what are they going to do within that division? Can they beat the Bills? Can they beat the Dolphins? Can they beat the Jets? Yeah, they'll probably steal a game at home somewhere, but you kind of look at Mac Jones compared to what those other three teams are bringing. I think, to me, the bet in this is taking the under with the Patriots in this division.
Yeah, that's interesting where they fall in terms of strength of schedule based on being favored or not. So I did my own rankings and then strength of schedule, and I have Buffalo as the third hardest schedule, New England as the fifth hardest. So similar, and I have a couple teams that I have in a different place than most people probably would, not in this division. But so you're right. They're going to face really tough schedules in New England. Even some of those easier games, if you look, are going to be on the road. And so that always ups the difficulty level, even in games that supposedly are going to be easier. D, anything that you're seeing as you look at the AFC East?
Taking a look at these lines here, there's not a lot that I want to bet into. I mean, the win total on the Jets is at 9.5. It's hard to sell me on the over. It's juice at a -145. Don't love that, really. It's like you should get a good year out of Rodgers. Like he should have 1 to 2 good years left, but you really don't know. They're probably a 10-win team. Probably not going to take the over there. You said that the Bills total was hung at what, 10.5 for their win total, or is that 11? It's 10.5 juice. I'm not going to take that one either. If anything, I would have to echo what Yanni said and take the under with the Patriots. It's a hard schedule. It's a pretty hard AFC East. So if there's a bet to take, it's either the Bills to take the whole AFC East, and that's pricey. It's a plus 125, or the Pats on the under.
Yeah, the bets are tough in this one. I think looking at this division for me, I am optimistic on the Jets, even though, I don't necessarily think Aaron Rodgers is going to be the Pro Bowl Aaron Rodgers, best in the league Aaron Rodgers. But if the Jets had a moderately competent quarterback last year, they would have won 10, 11, maybe even 12 games, and they would have been in the playoffs. And I think Aaron Rodgers is at least going to be that. I also like that Breece Hall should be back and healthy. So I think that gives them even more punch. I like what they did in the offseason overall. So I don't mind the over for them. I'm interested too. I'm not sure about Miami. In my own rankings, I have Miami as having the hardest schedule in the league. And when you go through and look at who they're going to have to face, they have to go to Philadelphia. They got to go across the country to the Chargers. They got to go to Kansas City. They're going to Baltimore. All these teams are going to have a tough schedule because they have to play each other a lot. But Miami actually has a lot of really hard out-of-conference games too. And I like Miami okay as a team, but I think schedule-wise, they're going to struggle to have a shot to win this division. So I like Buffalo, man. Steady, retained a lot of their key guys, brought back a team that I think is going to be really competitive once again at the top of the AFC. So any other thoughts on the East before we move on?
Let's go Bills, right?
Yeah, let's go Bills. There we go. Well, let's go on to the AFC North, which I think is a really interesting division this year, especially after what we saw in the offseason and through the draft. Pittsburgh, in a lot of people's draft grades, graded out as one of the top teams. Yanni, I think you had them as your top team in the draft, right?
I did. I think, overall, and I don't claim to be a draft guru. And obviously, you never know with this. They always say, we got to look back 3 years from now and figure it out. But I think when you look at the potential value based on where the so-called experts had them, I think Pittsburgh cleaned up in that draft. And they got not only did they get great players and value in that draft, but they got positions they needed help with. So I think overall, if you're a Steelers fan, you should be optimistic going into this season.
Yeah, for sure. D, anything on the AFC North that looks interesting to you?
It's always a really tough one, right? The Steelers, I think, had a pretty damn good draft. If I had to take anything on their win total, and they're always 500, right? It's hung at 8.5 now, juiced to the over. If I had to do anything, I guess I lean towards them being a 9-8 team. But at the end of the day, it's like, do I want to put my hard-earned cash on it this far out? Probably not. Cincy, T. Higgins is staying, right? They're keeping the whole entire core. So, I think that if you take anything, I like Cincy to take this whole division again. I think that they get to 12 wins. I'm not going to call it easily, but I'm taking a look at the win total market. At 11.5, over is even money at DraftKings. Don't hate that. Tasty. Keep me honest, I haven't taken a look at their schedule entirely, but I think that Joe Burrow can get them to 12-5. And if you're going to give me even money, sign me up, man.
Yeah, again, this is just my own rankings, but I have them as the 7th toughest schedule. However, I project them for 13 wins though, as well. So I do think that they can win this division. I like some of the things they did in the offseason, but what I'm going to throw at you guys for the AFC North personally is I really like the Baltimore Ravens. I think this is a team that dealt with a lot of adversity, a lot of it around Lamar Jackson. They had a lot of injuries. Rashad Bateman was out pretty much all season, which left them with no weapons. And so the fact that they drafted Zay Flowers, which is a good weapon, I believe Rashad Bateman should be back for the start of the season. They got Odell Beckham Jr. Now they have Mark Andrews. That is with Lamar signed and back in the fold. I think that's an incredibly dynamic offense. And they're always a pretty good defense. I know that there have been a few changes there, though they bring back a decent amount of that defense. So I actually have Baltimore challenging Cincinnati for the division title in the North. They're probably the team that I feel, after diving into everything, that I'm higher on than I thought I would be, I guess.
I'm going to agree with you on that. And I to me, in the NFC, San Francisco is kind of that volatile team that's could potentially be 13-4, or they could have a really bad record. And I think Baltimore is a little bit of that in the AFC. But I mean, I've got them penciled in for 11-6 going in. And right now you can get, it's a little bit juiced, but their win total's at 8.5. So, I mean, there's a discrepancy there for me that if you believe in this Ravens team, you got to go over on this. Cause I think that, you've got a couple games leeway to play there. I think you mentioned it. Obviously, if Lamar Jackson's healthy, I don't see how this team doesn't win 11 games here. And I do think that they're really right a tick behind Cincinnati in that division right now, but they could certainly win that if things go their way. So they're really the team I'm looking at. Outside of that AFC East, which we said is probably the hardest or the best division, I think the AFC North slots in right there because, I mean, at this point, you're looking at a Browns team that is probably going to finish around 500, give or take. But I mean, realistically, they got some talent on that team. And you look at them saying, wow, they're probably going to be the fourth place team in this division. Probably. You kind of start saying, okay, did the Steelers do enough there? But realistically, you mentioned it, though. I think this is the Ravens and Bengals here fighting it out. And I think that the Ravens, if Lamar is healthy with those weapons that you mentioned, they could be a really, really tough team. And I think the other thing we need to mention with the Ravens, change in offensive coordinator, right? Greg Roman's out. Greg Roman was kind of, we're going to pound the ball. We're going to run these, whatever you want to call them, older style offenses. And I think the league kind of a little bit caught up to that. They're going to be airing it out a little bit more here. And you start taking those three receivers you mentioned with Mark Andrews and the ability that Baltimore has to run the football. This offense could be really, really good. So I'm looking at that win total over for sure on Baltimore here.
You have me thinking about this now as well, and I was praising Cincy, but now that I have to take a look at it, the Ravens don't have that bad of a road schedule either. You have all of the teams in the AFC North, but then you have Cardinals, easy. The Jags is a tough one. Chargers, you never know. Niners, okay. And Titans, it's not the worst compared to Cincy, who, I mean, if you take a look at their schedule, I mean, they're at Chiefs, they're at Jags, they're at Niners. So they pretty much swap out Chiefs for Chargers, right? So it's not a bad bet. DraftKings currently hanging 9.5 on the win total. If you can find an 8.5, attack that one for sure.
Yeah, I hadn't bet that yet, but I think I'm going to have to go do it because I actually have them at 12 wins.
12 wins,
where
really?
I slotted
Okay.
them in. Yep.
Like it.
So,
like it.
and I have Cincy at 13, but that's one of those where, I'm always developing ranges too, but I think I had Baltimore's floor at 10 for me personally, at least right now. So over 9.5 seems good to me. So
yeah, it's not bad. And they went 10-7 last year. Is that how they ended? Yeah. 10 wins, I think. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. It's
they obviously had a rough end of the season. Right. But, with Lamar back,
Okay.
I like it. So, and that should be a fun division. To Yanni's point, I think it's not like Pittsburgh or Cleveland isn't capable of giving those teams a game every time they play either. Like that's no gimme in that division this year, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you got to look at the development of Kenny Pickett when you look at the Steelers, because obviously that's going to play a huge factor in how much this team improves. And then you could even say the same with the Browns with Deshaun Watson. I mean, obviously he looked terrible coming in last year. Will that experience in a training camp, will that let him elevate to that Pro Bowl quarterback we saw when he was younger? Time remains, it remains to be seen there. But I mean, this could be a really competitive division.
Yep. Should be a fun one. Well, let's move on to what may be a less competitive division, the AFC South. And D, I'll kick it to you first on this one because that's how generous I am to take the AFC South and see if you have any thoughts. But anything as you think about Jacksonville and the rest of the crew that you've seen in the offseason that catches your eye?
It's the Jags' whole thing to lose, right? So I actually went through today. It's not the Jags. I took the Titans under 7.5 wins. I think that they're not in total rebuild mode, but they're shopping Henry. I think they're shopping Tannehill. I just don't trust what this team can bring to the table at this point. Jags to win the division. Look, if they don't win the division, I guess it's the Titans that take it. It's certainly not Houston, who I still can't figure out what they're doing in the draft. Like, I get that they're trying to build a roster, but like, to build a roster, maybe don't give up a bunch of picks to have the third pick, but fine. But if you're going to do anything to win the division, Jags at -150, it's juicy, but we've all seen this before, that could turn into -250 after week 2. And that might be like a -500 after week 6. So I think it's Jags and Dougie P to lose. And then at that point too, Titans, I guess, to contend next, but I think that they're just a team that at a certain point, they just have to realize that maybe you just need to have a reset year, go 4-13, get as high of a draft pick. And I think maybe they realize that sooner than later. And that's why I took the under 7.5 wins on those Tennessee Titans.
Yanni, what do you think?
Yeah, D mentioned it, and I actually have it scribbled down here that if you can get anything -150 or better for the Jags in the division, you need to jump all over that. I have them as 4 games winning this division by a minimum of 4 games here. I think you're looking at a division where the Jags are inching towards that upper echelon of teams like the Bengals and the Bills and the Chiefs, and everybody else in that division is basically in that rebuild mode. And quite frankly, we don't know what we're going to get out of any of those quarterbacks. I mean, Tannehill, we know a little bit, but who knows if he's going to play, how long he's going to play. We don't know. They could throw, we don't know with any of these. I think you're right. The Texans, I don't like what they're doing. I think you guys know, I think CJ Stroud is going to be a colossal bust. You can put this on record, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I think he's, I don't see that working out. I don't know about Anthony Richardson. I think the Colts are better served. They'll probably play Gardner Minshew a little bit, and that'll actually probably help them a little bit early on. We'll see. But to me, it's like this division is all Jags. And outside of a Trevor Lawrence injury, I think they cruise to this division. I don't think it's even close.
Yeah, man, I can't disagree. I mean, to what you said, I have them 5 clear of the next team. So -150. And to your point, it would be a Trevor Lawrence injury or something like that. That would be fairly devastating. But with the quality of these other 3 teams, it's not like they'd be out of it if that happened, I don't think. Now, I will say, just for fun, a couple things. One is I actually do have Houston second in this division, and I'm not convinced that CJ Stroud is going to be a great quarterback either. I'm not high on him. However, I like what Houston did in the offseason outside of yes, they gave up way too much to get Will Anderson at number 3. Absolutely. But in the short term, he should be a great player, and they stocked this roster with like middle tier to upper middle tier veterans. Sheldon Rankins, Jimmy Ward, Robert Woods, Dalton Schultz, Devin Singletary, Denzel Perryman, Noah Brown, Shaq Mason, Case Keenum's the backup. Like, that is a stockpile of decent NFL players. And so when you look at them in comparison to the Colts and the Titans, who I think are really in total rebuild, I think Houston could take some significant steps forward. I really like DeMeco Ryans, and so I'm interested to see what he'll do in Houston, but I think he's going to be a good coach. So I like Houston in second, but I don't like them to challenge for the division by any means. I think those other 3 teams will all kind of fight it out with each other for who's worst and, second, third, and fourth. So I also, real quick, I will say, any other thoughts on Richardson drafted by the Colts? I actually liked taking the shot just because I think these quarterbacks bust half the time or more anyway. So if somebody's got huge upside, I'm kind of in the camp of like, take the shot. If it doesn't work it out, it doesn't work out. But any other thoughts on the Colts taking him and what you thought of that?
I mean, I'll add this in here. I thought
a project for sure. Yeah.
When Jim Irsay posted, should we take Will Levis? It's obviously that can't happen. But the thought process, though, to be honest, was spot on. Because like you said, you've got two guys, you don't know if either is going to work. What would you have to lose in that situation? Now, I think, from a talent standpoint, it seemed to most people think that Richardson potentially has the highest ceiling overall because he thinks, I saw, again, I'm not a draft guy. I'm not a big college guy, but, living down here, I saw him play on TV a little bit, and I just was never impressed with him. Now, that's not to say that he can't develop and do some things in the NFL. I mean, they had they added some weapons. They drafted, Mims at receiver there. They brought over Isaiah McKenzie, my guy from Buffalo, for a little speed in the offense. So it's not like they can't make it work there. I have a feeling, though, if Anthony Richardson works out, it's not going to be this year. I think it's going to be a rough go of it for him, getting started as a rookie. Doesn't mean he can't turn it around, but I think this first year is going to be really rough for him.
Totally agree. D, any other thoughts for you on that before we move on?
Totally agree as well. He's a project for sure. I think that it could kind of work out. If you're the Colts, you just have to keep on stockpiling picks and they have a win total of 6.5. You're not going to take the over on the Colts. If anything, it's on the under. I like the higher in Shane Steichen. I'm an Eagles homer though, so let's see what happens. And if you do anything, I'd lean towards the under on this team this year, and then we just have to see if it pans out. But sometimes you have to take a reach, and that's kind of what they did. And we'll see how it plays out there with Indy and Richardson.
All right, well, let's round out the AFC with the AFC West. This is a division, I will say, I have some thoughts on it, but this is the one I probably have had the hardest time really getting a handle on what I think about some of these teams. So would love to hear what you guys think. Yanni, let's start with you. What are you seeing when you look at the AFC West?
Yeah, interesting division. I look at it this way. The Broncos last year, they burned a lot of people who thought, hey, this team might be pretty good. Obviously, they had issues. Russ issues didn't work out. To me, they're the question mark here because at the very end of the season, Russ looked a little bit better, at the very end there. And this team has some good players on their roster. So can they rebound and be kind of what a lot of people thought they would be last year? I don't know the answer to that. So I'm kind of looking at the other teams right now in that division. And I'll tell you this, I think the Raiders are going to be one of the worst teams in the league this coming year. And I hate to say that. I actually like the Raiders organization, but I don't think that the quarterback is the answer that they're looking for there. I think that's going to get exposed. With that, obviously, even though I know Darren Waller didn't have a very good season, you take away that big tight end option, although I know they brought some people in. But I don't really like, I don't know that Devontae Adams is going to have that connection that, he had there. I don't like it. So I look at that and I start looking at that division, and it's like, you look at all these teams, and let me make one really quick point. I think that these GMs have gotten so good at what they do in the NFL that even when teams improve, it's almost like, how much did they improve compared to everyone else? It used to be who got better, who got worse. Now it's like everybody kind of gets better, but who gets a lot better? And I think that's kind of what you look at when you look at a team like the Patriots, for example. They got a little bit than they were last year, but when you compare it to the other teams in the division, where are they? And that's kind of what I look at with this Raiders team is, where are they compared to, the Chargers, the Broncos? So I've got the Chargers and Broncos kind of in that questionable area there. I think both could be good, but we kind of have to wait and see. So I'm looking at the Raiders there with their win total under 7.5. I have this as a 5-12 team. Like one of the league. Always go to the reliable cheater, right? 11.5. That's a big number for a team. We didn't get much in.
We're losing you a little, Yanni.
Best quarter of the league in part.
I thought it was me.
Can you guys
know? It's just breaking up some. We were getting you to the point where you had them at 5-12. That was what I got.
Oh, apologies.
No, you're good,
it's all
man.
good. I honestly thought it was my internet because I usually have issues. I was like, I can barely hear it, but it's probably me. I'm just gonna try to pick it apart. I can hear you
Why
now,
don't we
though.
try to,
My
yeah,
apologies.
go.
That's the hill.
No, you're good, man.
No, it's totally cool.
Can't control the internet, right? Do you want to get your thoughts? I will just say, Yanni, to your point, I actually have the Raiders at 5-12 too. That's what I projected them for as well. So exactly on the same page with you.
Totally
D,
agree.
thoughts on the West?
Totally agree. I'm on the same page. I think that we all kind of liked the Raiders to contend last year and said, okay, maybe they'll push 500, 10-7. I don't think that's going to be the case. Jimmy G, he's not the worst quarterback in the world, but it could be a pretty fun team. But if I had to take anything, under 7.5 wins for the Raiders. Shop it around, though, because it's juice at -150 at DraftKings. I mean, it's the Chiefs' whole thing to lose per usual. At some point, it's like, when will be that year where either like Mahomes gets hurt or Travis Kelce is finally cooked, and we just haven't gotten to that point. I'm interested to get your take because I can't convince myself to lay the juice to have Chiefs to win the AFC West. It's at -165. It's just a little juicy. And at some point, I think that we could have another team contend. The Chargers can show that they could at least hold the ground head to head to the Chiefs. It's just a matter of them putting it all together. They have an MVP tier quarterback. I think it's just a matter of them putting it together. So if I do anything, and I'd be going out on a limb, it'd be Chargers on the over and the win total at 9.5, because I do think that they are a 10-win team. And Chiefs, I think, Tasty, it's just a little too juicy for me to take it at this point to lay the juice, but they're probably going to win the Super Bowl again, right? So,
I mean, it's always a possibility. So
still stings here in Philly because I'm just like, I'm tired of Mahomes, I'm tired of Reed, but they just kind of get it done. And it wasn't pretty last year either. And I think that they got to 12 wins, and it really kind of looked a little bit ugly at times, but they usually get to 12 to 13 wins, and they have home field advantage, and the rest is that. So.
Yeah, so I'm going to begin my statement on the AFC West by saying one of the worst takes that I've ever had in all the videos that we've ever done was last year coming on here and making a case for the Broncos to contend in the AFC West last year. And
totally
that was
deleted
an absolute
that
disaster.
Broncos country left, right. But they had some pretty good value. It was what, like plus 260 to
don't try to save me, man. It was bad. Don't try to save me. It was
no
just
one
bad.
saw
It's okay. It's okay.
Bad. Nobody saw that happening.
I can live with it. But to that point, D, I do think, and Yanni, you said this earlier, I think so much comes down to what Russell Wilson can do this year. Because when I look across that roster that the Broncos have, I'm like, man, that's a good wide receiver group. They picked up Pirine in the backfield. Like, that's a decent running back, even if Williams can't come back at full strength right away. Like, they had a good defense last year. So I look at this Denver team as like, man, they've kind of got all the pieces if they had a quarterback that was good. But I'm not going to feel strongly enough. I am a little burned by last year, and I'm not going to feel strongly enough to do anything with it. Yanni, to your point, I love the way you put it of everybody gets better, but how much better? And I do think the Chiefs are a team that I look at and say, I don't think they got much better, if at all. Now, they're a very good team, so they're already there, but I don't think they kept up with anybody else in terms of their improvements. So I'm not necessarily way down on the Chiefs, but I'm not pumped about the Chiefs this year, I'll say. So
I think D brought up a good point there. If the Chiefs are at -165 to win that division, I mean, on paper, I've got them 2 games better than the Chargers. You got much better value going back to that Jaguars at -150 when you got a 4-game cushion there, at least, when we're looking at it. So I think you're right. I mean, obviously the Chiefs get the benefit of the doubt, but I think you're right. I think that, this could be the year where it gets a little bit tighter in that AFC West.
Great point. Totally agree. Jacksonville has much more cushion than the Chiefs do. So
totally agree.
And I mean, I was just going to say, and like when you look at playing 2 games against every team in their division, I think at least Denver and the Chargers are going to be very competitive. And I would say I think the Raiders will put up more resistance than the Colts or the Titans will, and probably the Texans too. So, I mean, maybe they're in a similar ballpark. So, yeah, I agree with that about the Jags.
If you want a home run bet, it's not a total home run, but Chargers are plus 350 to take it all. So if they take the AFC West, and look, I do think it's the Chiefs to take this whole thing for the next like 1 to 2 years, or perhaps as long as they have Patrick Mahomes, right? But Chargers at plus 340, you could make worse bets, right? So don't hate that one.
I just won't trust the Chargers till they do it.
That's part of
they're
the
a choker
thing,
organization, so it's hard for me to bet them.
They choke all the time, and they'll probably go 10-7. And
talent-wise, I don't disagree at all. So
yeah.
All right. Well, D, this is your moment. We've come to the NFC East.
Oh, it's the NFC East time.
How about those Eagles?
Pretty solid draft, pretty solid offseason. Few months losing to the Chiefs still stings, but Howie Roseman's doing Howie Roseman things. I know that he's made some pretty terrible picks in the past, but he's totally made up for it now. The draft, I don't think, could have gotten better. We're just stacking Georgia players here. The only glitch, I guess, that we have is we lost CJ but I guess at the end of the day, he kind of misplayed his cards there. He had an offer, didn't take it here, and then he went to the Lions and he got a 1-year deal. So, I mean, I have a bet on the Eagles already. I got him at plus 105 or plus 110 to take the NFC East. I think that's a little bit too low. You could make an argument that the Cowboys are there. I mean, we saw it last year. I mean, how close are the Cowboys? And did the Cowboys actually improve? Maybe. But, I mean, it's the Eagles' whole division to lose. It's actually plus 115 at DraftKings for the NFC East right now. If you want their win total, I saw a 10.5 earlier, juiced heavily, but 10.5 I think is pretty damn low. I have this team as another 13-win team. Cowboys, I think, are in that 11-win range. And then you take a look at the Giants as well, and they're building something. I know that they had to sign Jones to a long-term deal. I don't know if he's a great quarterback. He probably will never be a top 10. They had to do it because I guess that the alternative is go to free agency and take a shot in the dark. So it's the Eagles here. I'm hoping that it turns out as a better end result than last year. But, hey, we cashed a lot of tickets on the Eagles. We had them at 11-1 to have a 1 seed. I can tell you right now, we're not going to have those odds again this year. They're the fifth to win the NFC. It's only them and the Niners, right? And hoping that they can have the 1 seed again, and we'll be happy here in Philly. But Howie, man, hell of a draft, guys.
Yanni, take it away.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to the Eagles in just a second here. So I'll work my way up there. I like the Commanders roster, but I think they're going to struggle because, quite frankly, they're going to have the weakest quarterback in the division there. And I just think that's going to be too much for them to overcome, despite the fact they have some nice pieces there. The Giants, like you said, they're building some nice things. Like, they're doing a really good job, but unfortunately for what Dee mentioned there with Daniel Jones, I think they're going to kind of be stuck in that mediocrity. Now, I could see them pushing a little bit, but I can't see Daniel Jones doing enough to kind of overcome and be a division winner in this division here. The Cowboys, I think they're going to be right there just behind the Eagles again. I really, 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 one of the best acquisitions potentially is that Brandon Cooks acquisition for Dallas. I think that's really what they were missing on offense last year, was that complement to CeeDee Lamb that could get down the field, stretch the team. I think he gives them that, and I think obviously now they're going to be forced to play Tony Pollard. It'll be interesting to see as the total clear-cut kind of dominant back how he responds to that. But I think Dallas is going to be there. But look, at the end of the day, last year, I know for a fact, at least on my end, but I think collectively we made more money off the Eagles than anything else in the NFL last year, whether it was futures bets at the beginning of the season, futures bets during the season, or even betting the team during the season. We cleaned house with that. And quite frankly, last year I used the word disrespectful on the Eagles win total. Well, it's not disrespectful this year, but it's still very much playable in my mind. I think 10.5 is too low. I don't see how you can look at this team that almost won the Super Bowl and, in my opinion, got better. I don't see how you can look at that and say they're not going to win at least 11 games this year. Now, Last year, they did have a very soft schedule. This year, it's a little tougher. So obviously, they're not going to have as many gimme games as they had a year ago. But when you look at what I would anticipate is confidence from Jalen Hurts in that offense, really confidence for that whole team. And like you said, there really wasn't huge loss in this lineup. The fact that Roseman was able to keep Bradbury and Slay on the corners there and kind of restock with some of those Georgia players, Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith that you mentioned there, this team should be really, really good again. And I mean, even for schedule, I think they get to 12 wins here. I think that plus money to win the division. Yes, I think the Cowboys will push them a little bit. Giants might hang around. But I think if you're getting that at plus money, even at plus 105, but if you can get plus 1, you can respect their.
Yeah, I am 100% with you. So when I look at the NFC East, Yanni, I agree with, I think, pretty much all you said. I think I'm lower on the Cowboys than you are. I think that they maybe overachieved last year. I think your point about Brandon Cooks is a good one, though. I hadn't really thought about how that could free up CeeDee Lamb. I more just thought Brandon Cooks is a decent NFL receiver. He doesn't move the needle a ton for me at this point in his career. But I think if he could take the top off a little, that's a great point, and that could help out that offense. Missing Zeke, no big deal, except I think it was nice for Pollard to not have to play all the time. I think that could actually be trouble for him. I think he could end up hurt. So personally, I have the Eagles at 13 or 14 wins this year. Their schedule is tougher, and that's not going to just be easy. But I have them 5 games clear of the next closest team. So for me, it's similar to I have with Jacksonville. Yeah, so I have them at 13. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 4. 13 because I have the Giants at 9 and I have the Cowboys at 8. And certainly the Cowboys might end up – this is one of those teams where I would say I'm probably lower than the market, and I certainly could be wrong. But I think you guys have kind of said it, but I would just say strongly the Eagles were – the best team in the league or as good as anyone else in the league last year, and they did not get worse. If anything, they got younger and better. So I think this team should be dominant in the NFC. Now last year they did go through that little bit of a lull where they just played like shit for a few games, and that could happen, I suppose, again. But man, I just think the NFC looks ripe for the taking for the Eagles to me. So I like them a lot.
Fly Eagles.
Hopefully
fly.
I didn't curse them. Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully you didn't curse them there. Yeah.
Yeah. If anything bad happens, you can blame me, D.
Yeah, hopefully Hurts does not get hurt. That would be the only downside is that they do have a pretty tough schedule. True, they play at the Chiefs. Yeah, they have it's a hard, but they got to the Super Bowl. But if Hurts gets hurt, then it's like, okay, all of a sudden that's kind of where the 10.5 can come in. But honestly, even at that, to go 10-7 would be not good for anybody. So 10.5, I think, is you need to take the over there. It's a little bit juiced, but hey, come week 5, it could be 12.5, right? So
that's right, exactly.
So take it now.
And those alternate totals aren't out yet, so we can't.
It's still too
think
premature.
About 11.5 or anything. So, well, let's move on to the NFC North, and I'll talk about this a little since it's the Vikings division. Like everyone else, I like what Detroit has done. Their draft was a little bit wonky for sure, taking Gibbs at number 12. Was it 12 overall that they took him? And Jack Campbell too,
12.
Probably not the most athletic linebacker that they could have taken at that spot. But honestly, I don't think those are bad players. I just think they took them too early, but I think that they can still plug in and be productive. And I think with them letting DeAndre Swift go, which they needed to do because they obviously didn't like him, I think Gibbs slots into that role really well and could be really dynamic in that offense. So I think the offense is strong. The defense should be a little bit better, as you talked about CJ and some of the pickups that they've had there. So here's the thing that I think, though, is the Lions, to me, are one of those teams that have to prove that they can win over the long run. And they did have that great winning streak last year to get right into playoff contention. And if they can carry that forward, man, I think that they can be dynamic. I actually have their ceiling at 12 or 13 wins. So I think this is a team that has really high upside. what I'm not sold on is that they will actualize that upside. So I probably would not bet on them to win the division right now. I think that Minnesota is going to go overlooked. So D, you do a great job of talking about, like trading ranges, buying low, selling high, that kind of stuff. I think Minnesota became the whipping boy last year for them winning all these close games. They should have gone 1-16 or whatever people thought. And in the playoffs, they looked atrocious. They looked like the worst team in the league in that last game against the Giants.
Yeah, they didn't have a defense in that game.
Exactly. Right. They had no defense, but they changed defensive coordinators, which I think actually should help some. I'm not saying they're going to have a dynamic defense, but they might have a passable defense. And then you look on the offensive side of the ball, and there is always the question of if the offensive line can hold up. But with, oh my gosh, my mind's blanking. The dude they just drafted, Jordan Addison. Adding Jordan Addison, I think, makes that an incredibly dynamic receiving core. Plus, you have Hawkinson. I mean, KJ Osborne is no joke, especially as a third receiver, and Justin Jefferson is one of the top offensive players in the league. So I like Detroit's talent across the board better than Minnesota's. And I think Minnesota has to prove that they can play some defense, but I'm not writing them off at this point. Like, I think they have a chance to hang in there, especially if they can get Cousins some protection. Whoever wants to go.
Hit the nail on the head here. Yeah, I think that until the Lions can prove it to me, I can't take them at plus 110 to win the division. Like, I think that they're the best team there. They should be the best team. But it's like, at the end of the day, I mean, I've seen the Lions now for 10 to 20 years either be bad or just fucking underachieve. And, like, I'm just done seeing it. So if I have to take anything, I don't know what I'm getting out of the Packers. I really don't know. So if I take anything tasty, it's on your Vikes to go over 8.5 wins. I think that that's an okay bet. Do I think that they are, a top 5 team in the NFL? No, but you have a really good point in that everybody was just whipping on them and like, okay, they have a ton of close wins and they should be, a 2-win team. It's like, well, they won those games. And at the end of the day, they got to 13 wins. It wasn't the prettiest. Do I think they win 13 wins? No. But it wouldn't shock me if they get to 10-7 and they're trying to build a team here and the defense should be better. You have a new coordinator. So if I do anything, it's on them and maybe to win the division, which I need to click around on it. I mean, I'm probably not going to take that because I think it's the Lions' whole thing to lose. But again, Tasty, I agree totally that I can't take the Lions until they prove it for more than like a 5 to 6 game stretch, right?
Yanni, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add because I think you hit the mark there with really probably the Lions and the Vikings there. I mean, if you want to work your way up, I think I would say this in the NFC North, when I look at the projected win totals, I've got them pretty much dead on for all 4 teams. So, I mean, I feel like the bookmakers are close with what they're, what these probably are. To your point, I think the Lions do have a high ceiling, but I have to see it first. I think you guys articulated that very well. I think you're also right that the Vikings are probably being slighted. It's like they went from great to horrible like that. And that's not how this works, right? They're somewhere in the middle. So I think that they have, like you said, potentially a very dynamic offense. Whether or not the defense can catch up remains to be seen. The Packers to me are really the wild card though. And if you had asked me a year and a half ago going into this season, I would tell you the Packers would win 4 games. But Jordan Love's limited action last year, he looked really good. So without knowing what we're going to get from Jordan Love, I don't know how you can handicap the Packers at this point. I do know that from a quote unquote front office standpoint, they don't look like they're doing a lot of great things, but we'll see. Again, I think it all comes down to what Jordan Love can or can't do in this offense. If he can come in and play well, I think this team could win some games. If he comes in and struggles, I think they're going to be really bad. So I think we need to wait and see on them. And then the Bears really quickly, I think you guys know I'm not a Justin Fields guy. I do like they've had by most accounts one of the better off seasons. They brought in some big free agents. had a pretty successful draft by most accounts. So, I mean, I think that they've done some nice things. You look at that roster, and it's definitely better than it was at the end of last year. There's no doubt about that. But I'm just not a Justin Fields guy. I mean, maybe he'll prove me wrong and they'll win a bunch of games and he'll be an MVP candidate, but I don't see that happening. So I think when you look at these win totals, they're right there. There's nothing from a betting perspective at this point that sticks out to me at all in that division.
Yeah, Yanni, I'm with you. I like what Chicago did in the offseason, and I think I like Fields a little bit more than you do, though I think he's certainly limited as a quarterback, but he's so dynamic with his legs, at least for the next few years, and I think that moves the needle some. But yeah, I like what Chicago did in the offseason, and I have Green Bay slated for 4 wins right now, which is absolutely because of my anti-Green Bay bias. So I can't bet anything with that. It's probably just wishful thinking, to be honest, but well, let's move on to the NFC South. And Yanni, why don't you kick it off for the NFC South?
Yeah, this is another one where I think it's the books are pretty accurate here. I don't have a ton. I think the Saints definitely have the most initial upside here, just because I think realistically they're going to have the veteran quarterback that's there. They have some nice pieces in place already on that team. But I don't love them. I mean, I think that, they have the benefit of playing in the NFC South, which will probably help them. But I mean, I think that their win total's probably around where it needs to be. I like what the Falcons have done with their roster, but I just don't know that Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke are going to give them enough to really do anything. I mean, I think they're going to run the ball well. I mean, they ran the ball well last year, and that was without Bijan Robinson. So, I mean, they could be pretty dynamic offensively there, but I just, again, quarterback play worries me there a little bit. So, not a lot to like there. I think the Panthers did the right thing in drafting Bryce Young. Time will tell if that works out or not, but I don't think it's going to work out this year. I think they're a little ways away. And then the Bucks, I have a feeling that, that kind of cool feel-good story, Baker Mayfield came back, played well for the Rams. That was kind of a cool thing. I don't really see that repeating. I know that this team has some guys like Evans and Godwin, and they got some players on defense that are well-known, but I don't think the Bucks are doing anything. So to me, this division, when I look at it in terms of the odds, it's kind of like the NFC North. I just don't see a lot there. I think it's going to be a very mediocre to bad division overall, that I feel like the Saints are going to scratch out a way to be at the top, but there's just not a lot there for me, not a lot of meat on the bone for me.
Fair enough. D, anything there you disagree with or other thoughts on the South?
No, I think that all of the lines are pegged pretty good here. I think that the Saints should be the best team. Am I going to bet their win total at 9.5? Probably not. And they could still take the whole South, right? Like if they go 9-8, that could be good enough, because I don't know that we have a team that will contend with them. Atlanta, I like what they're doing overall. Will it work? Not too sure. They have an okay defense. They can certainly run the ball. But I don't know if what they have there is talented enough to get to 9 wins. If you want a shot in the dark, if you think that Atlanta can contend, you probably can get them at 3-1 to win division, probably a little bit less. So that could be a move. Tampa, love Baker's commercials, as we've said for years here, but that's really going to work. I mean, he had that, to Yanni's point, he had a few games there. He came to LA, looked okay, but I don't think it's going to happen. So Saints to win the division, but I'm not even sure that they go above 10 wins. I think it could be 9-8, and it could be a South whole thing that it's just painful to watch their games. It's like, oh, Panthers and Saints are playing great. I really don't want to watch that game again. So that's kind of where I'm at. Not a lot of value here in the NFC South.
All right, I'm going to diverge in opinion just a little bit, probably not incredibly substantially, but a couple ones that I feel more strongly about. I really like Atlanta actually in the South. I think this is a really weak division, and I know that Ridder is only in his second year, and we don't know exactly what we're going to get from him, but they're building an offense there that is based on the run, which takes the pressure off of the quarterback. And he has some good targets to throw the ball to when it comes to getting the ball out to Drake London or Kyle Pitts or whoever it might be. also, I feel like they added a lot. They added Calais Campbell, Bud Dupree. Mac Hollins is another weapon on offense that they added. So I feel like this is a team that took some serious steps forward. And I think that Ritter at least has significantly higher upside than Mariota did. They were a little bit of a circus sideshow with Mariota at quarterback last year. And I think in this division, Atlanta is a team that I like to win the division by a couple games, honestly. I like Derek Carr, but Michael Thomas is supposed to come back. He comes back every year and then doesn't stay back. Kamara, who knows what's going to happen with his situation. I just don't think that the Saints have a lot on offense. And I think Derek Carr is a Kirk Cousins type quarterback who can get the ball to playmakers if he has time, but he's not going to win you games on his own. They also lost a couple defensive pieces, so I think that could be a little bit down this year. I actually have the Panthers and the Saints both at 8 or 9 wins and the Falcons at 11. So I like the Falcons to win the division, and at plus 300, I definitely think there's value there because at the very least, I think they are as likely to win it as anyone else, even if they're not more likely. So I think that's good value. And then I think the Bucs are going to be pretty bad this year. I'm with you guys on Baker Mayfield. I think this is like a letdown year of crap. We used to be good. All our guys are getting old. We don't have a quarterback. What are we going to do? And they are in a weak division, but I can see this team winning 5 games, something like that. So don't like the Bucs. But yeah, so the Falcons are one of the ones I like this year. And I do like also who was it they added as their back? Oh, Heineke. Right. So Heineke, not amazing, right? But this is another guy that I think if he had to could come in and kind of keep the ship afloat versus Tyler Hundley or someone who can't do anything. Oh, you're muted, Yanni.
I would definitely say that the Falcons have the highest upside in that division for sure. I think their offense could be dynamic. Again, to me, it all comes down to if Desmond Ridder can get it done or Heineke. But, you look at they could be tough to defend if they can X and O scheme that up right. I mean, you mentioned kind of getting Pitts back in London, and now you can play Cordero Patterson a little more at receiver maybe because you've got Robinson and Algier there. So they can do some things. And you mentioned, adding guys like Jesse Bates and Calais Campbell. These are good veteran players that understand that this team was lacking in the past. So I think they definitely have the highest upside for sure when you look at their, potential there. I struggle until I see the quarterback position fully buying in. That's my only thing there.
Totally get it for sure. All right, well, let's move to the last division, which is the NFC West. D, kick us off with some thoughts on the last year finishing the season quarterbackless Niners and the rest of the division.
Yeah, right. I think that their whole entire fan base is still complaining and bitching about how that they didn't have a quarterback in the NFC Championship game. It's like, okay, well, turns out that the Eagles have a pretty damn good line and that they took out 2 of your quarterbacks. So Niners whole division.
that was the game plan.
Yeah, that's just it. Just take out the quarterbacks and then that's it. I don't know who's going to be the starter for the Niners. Are they still shopping Trey Lance? Is that the deal? Purdy, I guess he doesn't really have Tommy John. Yeah, right.
I think they're kind of leaning to Purdy, maybe a competition if Lance is still around. But I've heard that they're still listening to any offers for it, which I don't know that they're getting any, but if they did.
Right. So that said, it's like who can contend with them? Some will argue Seattle. I'm not as big on the Seahawks as some, but I know it's not going to be the Rams. So a bet that I took today, because I think that they're kind of like the Titans in that they have some vets that can, hold them in games. But at the end of the day, I think that they need to be in kind of like a rebuild mode. If they want to go 6-11, that'd be fine because I took them under 7.5 wins today. I think that it's going to be really hard for the Rams to get to 500. Ramsey's gone. Stafford, to be honest with you probably should have retired after he took the Super Bowl. I mean, he still can be a pretty good quarterback, but how long is he going to be healthy out there? And I really don't know the answer to that question. So Rams and the under I have as that bet. If you're going to take anyone to take the NFC West, the Niners, I guess, is the bet. It's juiced. Correct me if I'm wrong, guy. I think I saw it today, guys, at minus
165 maybe.
I'd rather take the Niners and the Chiefs at that juice price, but honestly, I'd rather have the Jags at minus 150 than the Niners at minus 165 also. So they are the second favorite to take the NFC for a reason, and two reasons. One, really good team and really good coach. Two, the rest of the NFC is, kind of mediocre. So Rams in the under, and the Niners will have to figure out what they're doing at quarterback, guys.
It's
Yanni.
definitely a division of the haves and have-nots there, with the Niners and Seahawks at the top and the Rams and Cardinals at the bottom. I mean, the Rams, obviously, they'll have Stafford and they'll get cut back and they've got Donald, but you kind of look at their quote-unquote big three. What else do they have on that team? Not a whole lot, right? So, it's going to be a little too much for them to overcome. Obviously, the Cardinals are in a basically total rebuild. So you kind of look, I mean, you mentioned it on San Francisco there. Love the roster. Love what Shanahan can do with that offense. Quarterback's still a little bit of a question. I think that's the thing that gives me at least a little bit of hesitation there. I mean, they don't need a world beater at quarterback. They don't necessarily need Patrick Mahomes there. They can get by, but they got to have something, right? So is Purdy going to be ready? Is it going to be Trey Lance? Is it going to be someone else? I mean, we'll see on that. But I will tell you this, one of my favorite bets is the Seahawks here in their.
Oh, is it? Nice.
On their win total. And I was actually the reverse last year on the Seahawks. You guys probably remember, I was not high on that team. I was not high on Geno Smith. I kept thinking, this team's going to fall apart. And they never really did. And I think this team sneakily got really good or better in the offseason here, because you now have Geno Smith, who's kind of proven he can do this here. We know what Pete Carroll's philosophy is. And I mean, I think they got a steal getting JSN there at receiver to be the third guy with Lockett and Metcalf. That's going to be tough potentially to defend there. But really what I like is what they did defensively here. And I love the draft pick that they got with Weatherspoon there. I think that, they can kind of play that defense that Carroll wants to play with matchup corners there. And bringing back Bobby Wagner is quietly a move that you didn't hear a whole lot about. Wagner, I don't know if you guys know, but PFF, I think, had him rated as the number one middle linebacker in the entire league last year. Wow. So take that for what it's worth, but obviously there wasn't a big fall off there. I mean, he was out there battling on a pretty crappy Rams team. So you kind of bring him back to the middle of that defense, which is really where Seattle struggled last year. And I don't see in that division, I mean, they're going to win 4 games, in my opinion, against the Rams and Cardinals there. You start looking at the rest of their schedule. To me, I can see a path to 11 wins on that schedule there. Right now, you can get their over-under win total around 8.5. So I think when you look at that, I'm taking the Seahawks over here, hoping that Geno can kind of keep it going. But I think this team could be sneakily good. Whereas a year ago, I was kind of on the opposite bandwagon with Seattle. So I'm buying in this go around. I think that they're going to get there. I like their win total over here.
Yep. 100% agree, Yanni. I mean, this along the lines of what both of you guys have said, but San Francisco's roster is just so solid across the board. They have a strong defense, a strong offense. Obviously, McCaffrey's there now. They still have Debo. Purdy, we'll see. Purdy looked okay. Can he play? Honestly, in San Francisco, they just need someone who can play decent. They don't need a world beater. So while I do like San Francisco and the stability and the coaching and all that stuff, I also love what Seattle did in the offseason. I think that offense has the chance to be incredibly dynamic. And I think, honestly, the Seahawks are a little bit like the Vikings, where their offense at least has a chance to be really good. And then can they shore up the defense enough to not have to score 35 points a game to win? And I think Seattle made some nice moves to go in that direction. So I love that over 8.5. I mean, I have their ceiling actually at 12 wins. Now that's their ceiling. So I would probably like them to be more around 10, but the line's 8.5. And maybe it's better somewhere else, but I saw minus 125. So it's just a little bit, but not terribly. So yeah, I love that. And then the other thing in this division is I think the Rams, when lines come out for the team with the worst record, I'm curious to see what the Rams line is. Like if they're given any respect. And here's the reason why. D, you named the players that they have left, but what happens when Stafford or Kupp gets hurt? Like then what?
They're totally
we
screwed.
Saw it last year.
They're totally screwed, and then they're turn
totally
into a 4-win team, and they're like a 1 or 2 seed in terms of the NFL draft.
Exactly. Yeah. And then Aaron Donald says, screw this. Why would I keep playing hard when this team is going to win 2 or 3 games anyway? So I actually think the Rams and the Cardinals are probably also in the running for worst record in the league. So, Yanni, to your point of the haves and have-nots, I think it's two good teams and two of the worst teams in the league in this division this year. So, well, let's wrap it up this way. As you guys are looking at the odds, maybe in terms of Super Bowl odds or conference winner odds, some of those bigger picture ones, are there any that stand out to you as like, wow, that is not where I would expect it to be? And I'll kick it off because I shared one with you guys when we were coming on. And again, this is not a team that I really expect to win the Super Bowl, but on FanDuel, the Seahawks are at plus 4,500 to win the Super Bowl right now. And I had told you guys teams that have better odds than them right now include the Packers, the Vikings, the Giants, the Saints, and the Browns. I don't think any of those are right, personally. So I put a little bit on them just because I think that line is way out of whack, even though I wouldn't favor them to win the Super Bowl by any means. You guys have any that are sticking out to you as you look at those Super Bowl or conference odds?
Looking through all of these, yeah, like if you can get the Seahawks at that price, do that for sure, because DraftKings is hanging a 30 to 1. So if you can get a 45 to 1, then definitely get that one. I agree that like if they have an upstart year, and they had an upstart year last year, if they continue to put it together, 30 to 1 isn't bad. I'd rather have them at 45 to 1 than Steelers at 50 to 1. In terms of other lines that kind of stick out, it caught me off guard earlier that the Lions are the fourth favorite in the NFC to win. I guess I just forgot that the Lions are in a whole division that they should take at this point. In terms of other lines that stick out, I'm not going to bet into the Niners at 9 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. The Jaguars at 25 to 1, I can make an argument for, because we think that they should get to like 11, 12 wins. And if they somehow, not stumble, but get into like a 1 or 2 seed and have home field advantage, if the Jags find themselves deep in the playoffs, you could do worse than 25 to 1. Sign me up.
Yanni, any?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys mentioned a couple, and just FYI, the Seahawks on points bet are 60 to 1.
What?
And on Caesars, they're 50 to 1. So you can actually.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and to me, that's the one that sticks out. I mean, again, use the word disrespectful. Like, I don't understand that. I mean, to your point, do I think they're going to win the Super Bowl? Probably not. But when you look at the true quote unquote value there, I mean, 60 to 1. For that team, that's crazy to me. So, I look at that one there, and then, D mentioned the Jaguars. I think you could look at them. But I think the two, if you're really trying to dial these in, I think the Bengals there out of the top teams probably have the best value overall. I mean, they've proven they can get to the Super Bowl. They almost got there again last year. And you can still get them plus 1,000, plus 1,100 different places. I think when you compare that to the Eagles, the Niners, the Bills, the Chiefs, to me, that's where that's at. And then the other one I would throw out there is you mentioned the Ravens there. I mean, this is a team that they haven't really proven with Lamar that they can get through a season and a gauntlet playoffs. But I mean, at Caesars, they're 25 to 1, DraftKings are 25 to 1. And I think that the team has a lot of upside. So, I mean, I think, you look at the Jags, you look at the Ravens, you look at the Bengals, and you look at the Seahawks. Those are four that I would really look at there if depending upon how big of or how far the fences you want to swing for there. I think you can look at those teams right there. But I think the Bengals would probably be my number one overall play if I had to play something.
Yeah, I like that too. I was even looking at the Bengals for the AFC at plus 575, I think isn't terrible. So,
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and you guys can disagree, but when you look at the Chiefs, you look at the Niners, you look at the Eagles, you look at the Bills, why wouldn't the Bengals be basically right there? Why are they behind those teams? I don't understand that.
I agree with you. I think that if you can get them above 10 to 1, then that's a bet. Like they're 11 to 1 at DraftKings, like that, they should be in that tier. And if you can get them, I would rather have them than the Chiefs at 6 to 1, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agree.
They should have, I mean, in my opinion, the Bengals and Chiefs should have darn near close to even odds there in terms of where they're at. So why you're getting twice as much with the Bengals, I mean, it makes no sense to me.
Totally. Yeah, I think Chiefs, Bills, and Bengals are like that's the likely AFC top three to me is Chiefs, Bills, and Bengals. So All right. Well, hey guys, this has been fun. Good to connect on some NFL, and I know we have 128 days, but we'll find some reasons to connect at some interval in between now and then. So it was great to see you guys again. Great to kick around some NFL.
Appreciate it, Tasty.
Take care, guys.
All right. See you guys.